My sister always manipulated me, but I discovered my strength and rebuilt my life. I always felt small in my own home, even though I was the oldest. My sister Natalie always seemed to have the upper hand in everything, garnering praise, attention, and opportunities that I also craved. For years, I tried to ignore it, remain calm, and believe that my time would come, but the constant comparison and manipulation games began to erode my self-esteem. I felt trapped in a maze with no way out. Every effort seemed insufficient, every achievement overshadowed. The feeling of injustice was daily, silent but profound. My mind filled with frustration, and my heart with a sadness I didn't know how to express. There were times when I cried in secret, wondering if I would ever be truly seen, if I would ever be able to prove myself worthy of respect, love, and recognition without having to compete aggressively. My name is Olivia, and this story happened a few years ago, when I was 27. The time, I was working as a marketing analyst and dedicated myself intensely to my professional growth. But I felt that, despite my efforts, everything I achieved seemed small compared to my sister's constant manipulation and comparisons. My personal life was also marked by insecurities. Friendships and relationships became complex because I was always on high alert, waiting for a hint, a criticism, or a silent challenge. I lived on constant alert, as if I had to walk a tightrope at home, maintaining a smile and calm while silently feeling the weight of injustice. Natalie had a natural ability to charm people and manipulate situations to her advantage. And no matter how hard I tried to stand out, it seemed my light couldn't shine without her trying to extinguish it. I remember countless occasions when I would plan professional or personal achievements, and when it was time to celebrate, she would distort the facts, take credit, or turn the narrative against me. It was a crushing feeling, seeing my own accomplishments turned into a source of criticism or ridicule, and feeling like no one, not even close family, saw the full truth. Frustration would build, and I would often question my abilities, my worth, and whether I would ever succeed without resorting to trickery or unfair competition. Over time, I realized I couldn't continue living with this constant feeling of diminishment. It was painful to admit, but part of the problem was that I hadn't learned to value myself before expecting external recognition. My anger and sadness began to mix with determination. I needed to find a path of strength, a way to grow despite manipulation and injustice. I began seeking answers, therapy, reading about self-esteem, stories of people who had overcome similar adversities. Each insight, each small step, gave me clarity. I needed to rebuild my confidence from the inside out, strengthen my voice, and learn to protect my emotional space without losing the tenderness that had always defined me. The first step was simple yet revolutionary. I learned to say no and set clear boundaries. This seemed small compared to the magnitude of what I was facing, but it represented a break from years of silent submission. Each time I stood my ground in the face of small manipulations, I felt my strength grow. Each day, I realized that my emotional freedom didn't depend on Natalie or anyone else. It depended on me. And even though I feared conflict and rejection, I kept moving forward, allowing courage and determination to shape my new path. It was the beginning of a journey that would transform not only my relationship with my sister, but also the way I viewed my own life and my worth. The challenges increased when I realized that simply protecting myself emotionally wasn't enough. I needed to rebuild my life on every level. My self-esteem was still fragile, and years of manipulation had left deep scars. I began to face feelings of constant doubt. Can I move forward without being undermined again? Do I deserve to achieve my goals without someone trying to bring me down? These questions tormented me and often paralyzed me. But unlike in the past, I didn't let fear dictate my actions. Little by little, I learned to break the inertia, facing small daily challenges. Each step seemed minimal, like responding to criticism calmly, completing an important task without expecting praise, or simply allowing myself to feel proud of something I'd accomplished. Each victory, no matter how small, became fuel. Over time, these small achievements began to accumulate, generating a strength I never imagined I possessed. What seemed insignificant at the time became solid building blocks in my confidence and emotional independence. A crucial point in this journey was realizing that my sister's manipulation wasn't about me, but about her. Understanding this was liberating, yet painful. For years, I carried guilt and fear, believing that something within me justified her behavior. By accepting that I had no control over her actions, but complete control over my choices, I began to change my relationship with reality. It wasn't about ignoring or minimizing the pain, but about transforming suffering into learning. I began to observe my own reactions, question behavior patterns that left me vulnerable, and implement habits that strengthened my self-esteem. I began writing daily, organizing my thoughts, planning my goals, and celebrating every achievement, no matter how small. This process taught me that true overcoming doesn't come from tearing others down, but from building yourself up, brick by brick, with patience and emotional discipline. At the same time, I needed to rebuild my social and professional relationships. For a long time, I felt that any decision I made would be used against me, and this alienated me from some important people. I began to surround myself with people who truly supported me, friends and colleagues who valued my effort and integrity. I learned to say no without guilt, to protect my time and space, and to not allow nasty comments or unfair criticism to determine my self-esteem. Each assertive decision was a step toward my freedom. I remember an important meeting at work where, for the first time, I didn't let myself be intimidated by Natalie's looks or subtle comments, which still tried to manipulate others' perceptions. I stood my ground, presented my ideas clearly and confidently, and felt, for the first time, that my voice carried weight. This feeling of being heard and respected, even in the face of adversity, was a profound emotional milestone, as it meant that my strength was growing in a concrete and visible way. The internal battle, however, wasn't over. There were moments of doubt and near give-up, especially when family manipulation intensified or when I saw results slow to appear. At these times, it was as if the past came back to haunt me, reminding me of the times I felt powerless, small, and ignored. But I had learned techniques of emotional resilience, conscious breathing, reflection before reacting, seeking counsel from trusted people. I began to transform pain into positive energy, using each difficult situation as training for my inner strength. Every emotional confrontation, every feeling of injustice, became an opportunity to learn, grow, and strengthen my resolve to no longer be a victim of circumstances. It was during this process that I realized a profound internal shift. I no longer depended on Natalie's or anyone else's approval to validate my worth. I began making decisions based on what was right for me, not on what others expected. This realization brought freedom and self-confidence. I could finally look to the future without fear of being manipulated or diminished. Life began to open up with new possibilities. Projects that once seemed impossible were now achievable. My relationships became healthier, and I felt, for the first time in years, in control of my own story. This awakening was a true turning point, showing me that overcoming adversity isn't about punishing or defeating others, but about rebuilding yourself from the inside out, with courage, patience, and self-love. Over time, I realized that every challenge Natalie posed was actually an opportunity to strengthen my character. When I tried to approach an important project professionally, I was confronted with indirect and subtle manipulations that sought to discredit my ideas. In the past, this would have paralyzed me, but now I could observe clearly and react with emotional intelligence. Instead of engaging in conflict or retaliating with anger, I documented my efforts, organized my ideas strategically, and shared concrete results with those who truly mattered. Each small step forward was a silent victory, and I felt a deep satisfaction in realizing that my strength didn't depend on anyone's approval. I learned that, even in situations where others try to tear us down, it's possible to grow and shine without resorting to aggression, simply by maintaining integrity, focus, and persistence. At the same time, I had to deal with feelings of doubt and fear that constantly arose. For years, the manipulation made me question my capabilities, my perception of reality, and even my worth as a person. I asked myself, am I capable of overcoming this? Will I ever feel fulfilled? But each small step of courage was an answer to these questions. I sought emotional support in therapy, trusted friends, and motivational reading. I discovered that overcoming obstacles isn't linear. It requires patience and consistency. There were days when it seemed impossible to continue, moments when the urge to give up was overwhelming. But in each of these moments, I remembered who I was and how much I had endured thus far. Each challenge I overcame became concrete proof that I could rebuild my life, step by step, even in the face of the greatest adversity. The most profound transformation happened when I realized I no longer needed to compete with my sister to feel valid. For years, I lived in Natalie's shadow, trying to prove my worth to her and everyone around me. This silent competition drained my energy and overshadowed my achievements. The turning point was understanding that my self-esteem and happiness didn't depend on comparisons or external approval. I began to set my own goals, celebrate my achievements, and invest in my talents and passions. Small habits like writing, taking care of my physical and emotional health, and allowing myself moments of genuine joy began to accumulate, creating a solid inner strength. This process taught me that true overcoming isn't about beating others, but about rebuilding and valuing yourself every day, regardless of external circumstances. There was a defining moment that symbolized my evolution. During a family gathering, Natalie tried to manipulate me again with veiled criticism and comparisons. In the past, I would have remained silent, accepted the injustice, and felt diminished. This time, I took a deep breath and responded calmly and confidently, affirming my accomplishments without arrogance, only with clarity and assertiveness. The reaction was one of surprise, and, for me, a quiet relief. I realized that my strength didn't need to be blatant to be effective. It was consistent, calm, and unwavering. This moment made me realize that my transformation was real, that I had gained control over my life and my self-esteem, and that no one could dictate my worth anymore. From that moment on, my life began to align with my dreams and values. I rediscovered old passions, invested in professional and personal projects I previously thought impossible, and strengthened relationships that genuinely supported me. The feeling of freedom and autonomy was immense. Finally, I no longer had to live with fear, guilt, or insecurity. Every step I took was a celebration of my strength, proof that overcoming adversity is built with courage, persistence, and self-love. I discovered that, even in the face of manipulation and adversity, it is possible to transform pain into learning, weakness into strength, and fear into freedom. Today, I look back on my journey with gratitude and pride, knowing that I won not because I defeated my sister, but because I conquered myself. As the days passed, I realized that true overcoming wasn't just about overcoming external challenges, but about consolidating my inner strength. Before, every criticism, manipulation, or comparison brought me down. Now, every difficult situation was seen as an opportunity for growth. I began to recognize the difference between reacting impulsively and responding wisely. This shift was slow and steady, but incredibly powerful. Each time I chose not to let my sister's negativity affect me, I strengthened my sense of identity and self-control. Gradually, my life stopped, revolving around other people's approval, and began to reflect my values and dreams. I discovered that peace and confidence don't come from controlling others, but from mastering ourselves and our choices. This awareness transformed my routine, my relationships, and my outlook on life. My career also began to flourish like never before. With a clearer mind and a lighter heart, I was able to invest in projects I'd previously hesitated to tackle, fearful of Natalie's interference or judgment. With each goal achieved, I felt genuine joy, unlike any superficial recognition. It was a victory over myself and over the years of insecurity that had plagued me. I learned to value my own effort, to trust my abilities, and to celebrate each step, even when it seemed small to others. The sense of accomplishment became more intense because it now came from within, not from external expectations. This shift not only boosted my career, but also strengthened my self-esteem and my sense of purpose in life. Additionally, I worked hard on my emotional intelligence. Before, my mind was filled with negative thoughts and fears, which made me feel trapped. Today, I can identify patterns of manipulation, recognize my vulnerabilities, and choose my responses consciously. I learned to maintain my integrity without giving in to pressure, to set firm boundaries, and to value my emotional well-being above all else. This daily practice of self-care and self-awareness became a solid foundation for my life. I realized I no longer needed to prove anything to anyone. My validation came from within, and that was liberating. Each step in this process increased my confidence, strengthened my resilience, and reminded me that the power of overcoming challenges is built from the inside out. My relationship with my sister, though still complex, has also changed. I didn't expect miracles or perfect reconciliations, but I learned not to let her actions control my emotional state. Today, I can listen to her provocations without being affected. I can recognize her flaws without it diminishing my worth. This conscious distancing was an act of self-love and maturity. I learned that overcoming grief doesn't depend on the other person changing, but on our ability to choose how to react, how to position ourselves, and how to move forward. The emotional freedom I achieved became my greatest triumph. I no longer needed to live in the shadow of manipulation. I could finally be the protagonist of my own story. Today, looking back, I see that my life has completely transformed. From someone who felt small, insecure, and held hostage by circumstances, I became a confident, resilient woman capable of transforming challenges into learning experiences. Every obstacle overcome, every moment of doubt, and every assertive decision brought me closer to the person I always wanted to be. I discovered that true victory lies not in defeating someone else, but in conquering oneself, finding emotional balance, and building a life based on self-love, determination, and authenticity. My story is proof that, even in the face of manipulation and adversity, it is possible to rise up, transform pain into strength, and become the protagonist of your own life. The most exciting part of this journey was realizing that, finally, I no longer needed to prove myself to anyone. For years, I lived in the shadow of manipulation and comparisons, believing that my happiness depended on the recognition of others. Today, my self-esteem has strengthened to the point where I fully trust my choices and decisions. Every step I took, every limit I set, every victory, no matter how small, built the foundation of the resilient woman I've become. I discovered that overcoming obstacles is less about defeating others and more about conquering yourself, about rising every day even when faced with seemingly insurmountable challenges. My personal and professional life transformed. I began to invest in dreams I previously thought impossible, such as creative projects, travel, and further studies. Each achievement was celebrated with pride and gratitude, not with comparison or competition. Friendships that were once superficial or filled with judgment were replaced by healthy relationships of support and mutual respect. I became a woman who inspires confidence and security, not through arrogance, but through integrity, emotional strength, and the courage to move forward, regardless of the circumstances. The relationship with my sister, which previously dominated my thoughts and emotions, became irrelevant to my well-being. I learned that I can't change anyone, but I can choose my peace. Overcoming this came when I realized that my happiness and success depended solely on me. Today, I can look back on moments of pain with gratitude, as they taught me resilience, self-knowledge, and determination. Each challenge was a building block that strengthened my confidence, each disappointment a valuable lesson on how to preserve my energy and value my own life. The true victory was internal. I learned to respect myself, to trust my strength, and to believe that I deserve everything I've achieved. It wasn't easy. There were nights of tears, moments of doubt and fear, but each difficulty was transformed into a learning experience. Today, my outlook on life is different. I see possibilities where before there were only barriers, and I see obstacles as opportunities for growth. My story is proof that even in the face of manipulation and adversity, we can emerge stronger, more resilient, and more confident, transforming each experience into fuel for our personal evolution. If I share this story, it's to show that anyone can transform pain into strength, fear into courage, and manipulation into learning. Today, I am the protagonist of my life. Every choice I make, every limit I set, and every achievement I celebrate are proof that it is possible to overcome seemingly impossible challenges. My life is not defined by others, but by my inner strength, determination, and courage. I've learned that true overcoming doesn't require perfection, only persistence, self-belief, and self-love. If you're going through difficult times, remember, victory begins within you, and you can write your own story of overcoming.